says that really loud so everyone knows. All right, I think I got everything. Yeah, so we were just talking about the storm and stuff, and like I said, we fared pretty well driving through our neighborhood. There's a bunch of people with a bunch of damage and fences all. I mean, fences gone, and parts of roofs gone and all that kind of stuff. So we got very little damage. We were pretty lucky, all in all, and stinking thing. So I just slapped together my stuff real quick. I have my setup to be fairly mobile, so I can go and meet people. Like
Nice.
I don't know if you ever met Sergeant Stout while we were overseas because he was over there with us.
I don't think
Um,
so.
I think because they were in JBB,
Okay.
so they had different coasties and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm supposed to be meeting him later in the month, so like I wanted to have everything where I could throw it in a bag and go and meet people wherever they are. So I did that this morning. I ran over there real quick, chucked everything in the bag, and set it up over here real quick. So,
Nice.
but it works. It's going. It's not exactly what I wanted to be, but it's all right. It'll happen as long as you can hear me all right. I can hear you all right,
I can hear you.
and it is recording. Okay, all right. Um, so yeah, we make it work. It'll happen. I just remembered last night about it too. After everything, I was like, "Oh yeah, I got Jesse in the morning. Crap, how am I going to do this?" And my wife's like, "Well, I guess you're going to have to reschedule." I was like, "I'm not doing that again. I will figure it out." So,
Oh, well,
all right,
kudos, man. Thanks for, you know,
it's all right. Like I say,
getting it
it's.
together.
I want to make it happen for you. So, because this is all about you and anybody else who's willing to talk at my face for a while. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
All right. So, Jessica Snyder, typically we go by Jesse, or as my fellow coasties and Army guys know me as Justice. Um, so a little bit about me. I just retired from the Coast Guard after just about 17 years. I was medically retired in May of this year. So still kind of adjusting to that. Um, I am married. I have we have 5 rescue dogs, which is something that's constantly a turnover in our house because we rescue like seniors and special needs medical dogs, that sort of thing. So uh, you'll probably see me getting up and moving around and changing diapers and doing all that fun stuff.
That's all right. Whatever we
But
got to do. Whatever
um,
breaks you may need or anything like that. Do you have a bottle of water? I do suggest having a bottle of water or something around.
I do
Yeah,
have some
yeah.
caffeine.
Because oh yeah, I have a cup of coffee over here too. That's kind of become our thing when we started doing this. Is we always had like a cup of coffee on hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, like you get to talking for like 45 minutes, then you're like, I'm parched. I need something to wet the whistle, you know.
Need a little something to keep it wet in there.
So joined the Coast Guard. You were in for 17 years. What were you
Yep.
doing before the Coast Guard?
So I'll give you the short version of sort of how I came to be. But I was a Air Force brat. Both my parents were in the Air Force. They were stationed at Langley, and that's where they met. So soon after I was born, my father had gotten injured and ended his promising Air Force career at the time. He was a dog handler and loved it, loved dogs, loved training, all that sort of stuff. So fast forward, I end up becoming like his little protege as far as like military stuff goes. And as a kid, I did Civil Air Patrol, and then in college, I did Air Force ROTC. Went off to do my little Air Force officer boot camp training down in Louisiana. I was like 19 years old, and it was awesome. I graduated number 1 in my class. I'm like, this is going to be great. And then had some family stuff come up, and my dad got sick, and I was like, let me hit the pause button on this. So I didn't sign my commissioning papers. Went back, finished finished college with a criminal justice major and a minor in psychology. And then I went to work as a paralegal for a while. The goal was to go to law school, and then that sort of goal line kept getting pushed a little bit further um, as time went on. And then let's see, first job I had after college was at a insurance defense firm. Kind of got my feet a little bit wet, but man, boring stuff.
So were you on the side of the insurance agencies?
Yeah,
So you were part of the enemy, huh?
yeah, it was. Yep. Yeah, looking back, I realized that like early on in my legal career, I sort of sold my soul to the devil. And then I tried to like get some of it back again. So I was there for a couple of years and it was I worked for a husband and wife law firm,
Mhm.
which was, any marriage is crazy enough, but then you stick the two of them like their offices like this and then a secretary in the middle. Man, stuff is always flying back and forth and F-bombs and everything else. It was crazy.
So they're yelling at you, will you tell my wife, blah, blah,
Oh,
blah. Will
absolutely.
you
Yep.
tell him he can blah, blah, blah.
All the time. It was like the definition of a hostile workplace. But that's where I was at when 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And, we all like a lot of the folks that I worked with had, spouses or family members that worked in the city. So they were trying to, get radios. We didn't have a TV in the office, but trying to, find out what was going on. And
Where were you at this time? Like, look, geographically wise.
oh yeah, yeah, sorry.
No, you're
Yeah,
fine.
I'm gonna skip all around, so you'll have to be like, ah, shit. Follow.
Well, my intention, like I tell a lot of people, is I don't want to necessarily lead the conversation, but just, keep the wheels on the road kind of thing,
Yeah, you need to keep my train on the tracks because I'll go off. All right, so New Jersey. New
Okay. All
Jersey
right.
was home for me.
So when you say like you had people in the city who worked in there, you were pretty adjacent to when that all happened.
Yeah, we're about a hour and 20 minutes south of New York
Okay.
City.
Gotcha.
So that's where I spent most of my, child and adulthood, right on the Jersey Shore. Not like Jersey Shore the show, but I always get that question.
What it's actually like, not
Yeah,
the
yeah, exactly. Not everybody's friends with Snooki.
dramatized.
Um, but yeah, so it was kind of crazy. And the two people that ran the law firm, they were like, "Oh, it's no big deal. Like, just get back to work." And boy, were they wrong.
That's the
But
first reaction I've got like that because I've spoken to a couple of people now who about 9/11 and looking back because I was in school and for everyone so far it's like the world stopped. But for
yeah.
you, they're like, get back to work. Day's not done.
Oh yeah. I mean, we ended up just walking out of the office because we're like, I don't even know how we can be here right now.
Yeah.
So they got pissed and they docked us pay and like we all just walked out pretty
Well,
much.
good for you guys.
Um, and I remember like talking with my dad after that happened and stuff and being like, holy crap. Just like everybody, right? Just couldn't believe that something like that happened.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so after that, I was like, I really like I feel like the military is in my blood, like
Mhm.
literally in my blood. My dad's dad was in the Air Force, my dad was in the Air Force, my mom was in the Air Force, so I'm third generation military. And so I went to Air Force recruiter, like Air National Guard recruiter. That was, I don't know, maybe like a half an hour from my house, uh, down by good old McGuire Air Force Base in Fort Dix for many folks that went through some pre-deployment training there. And started that whole process again. And unfortunately, they marked me as medically not qualified because I had low blood sugar. So I was
Really?
like, oh man, that's a kick in the teeth.
That's
Um,
that's an interest I've never heard that before as low blood sugar being a disqualifying.
yeah, I guess in 2001, before they like, this was probably pre-invasion.
Hmm.
They were like, nah. And then shortly after, maybe like a year after that, I was like, oh, this sucks, man. I really wanted to, try and go back in. So I went over and I talked with an army recruiter. And they were like, oh, hell yeah, come on in. We'll give you a waiver. We'll make you an officer. We'll do whatever you want.
Yeah, we'll
And
take
I'm like,
anybody we can get.
you're a little too excited for me. I need to find some like middle ground here. So, and at that point, after those whole shenanigans with the husband and wife and post 9/11 there, I was like, well, this place is not for me. So I moved on to a bigger law firm, just maybe about 20 minutes up the road from that in Ocean Township, New Jersey. They did a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
So I ended up doing some civil defense work, civil defense, civil litigation, and it was good with some of the work that we were doing until I started getting into we represented the city attorneys for Asbury Park and Long Branch in New Jersey, where they were doing a lot of redevelopment work,
Hmm.
trying to, uh, make blighted areas like nice and fancy and bougie, where people that live there can't afford them.
Yeah, some people would call it gentrification.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, we want to see the oceanfront, like, get back some business and everything. I'm like, oh, this is good. And then we started like, like pushing old people out of their homes that they'd been in. And I
Yeah.
was like, man, like, I just feel so icky. In the words of my friend Abby, I just feel so icky. Like, I just can't do this. I don't have the conscience for it.
Yeah.
So an opportunity came up a couple years after I started there to take a position at Seton Hall Law School. And it's in Newark, New Jersey, so right across the river from New York. And I worked in their nonprofit social justice clinic. And I was like, man, perfect fit.
Yeah.
Like, love the work that I did there. Everything had meaning. You're helping people that otherwise wouldn't be able to get the attention or help. Um, and it was pretty awesome. Like, um, I got to do some immigration work, representing um, asylum seekers and women that were trying to specifically women that were trying to seek asylum for under the VAWA, it's a Violence Against Women's Act.
Okay.
Um, uh, Kids, like young girls who had been trafficked in from other countries and sold into the sex trades, like um, stuff that was meaningful,
Hmm.
trying to help these people out. And then some education stuff and like predatory lending, the civil defense side of things. So that was pretty cool. Really enjoyed the work that I did there. And at the time, I stayed good buddies with one of the girls that I became friends with at the second law firm. I don't know. Can I say the names on here?
I would be careful with saying names
Okay.
just in case.
All right.
Um,
So my friend Kathy, um, we uh we were like best buddies at that second law firm where I was doing all the eminent domain stuff. And we used to run like 5K races together and like do all this fun stuff. So she was always dating different guys and stuff. And one of the guys that she happened to be dating, who was a runner too, we were at a race, I think in Spring Lake, New Jersey, and he's chatting it up with me afterwards and talking to me about he's in the Coast Guard and he's a cook in the Coast Guard. He's on a ship and like he loves the Coast Guard and it's so awesome. And I was like, oh, I don't really know much about the Coast Guard. I know that we have a Coast Guard station here and that's about it. So I did some research and called the recruiter and then called the recruiter and then called and called and called and called the recruiter. And then stalked the recruiter for a little while because they didn't call me back. So much different than working with the Army or Air Force recruiters. But eventually I finally pinned the guy down and got the process started. So I went into the reserves and he had talked to me about, with my past experience and I had my college degree and all this stuff. If, I wanted to try and go the officer route at the time. And I was like, honestly, I don't really know a whole lot about the Coast Guard.
Mhm.
And like, this is going to be like my cool part-time job. So I want to do something fun.
Don't necessarily want to
So
jump in and be in leader of troops and
yeah,
such.
yeah. I mean, and it had been, at that point, probably 6 or 7 years since I had, been active in any sort of military type environment. So
Wanted to reacclimate a little bit, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe get some military bearing back on
Yeah.
ish. So so yeah, so the guy tells me, and we always joke around. One of the guys on my raid team, we nicknamed him Fibs,
Mhm.
because he was a recruiter, and recruiters always lie, right?
Yeah.
So this guy, my recruiter, was like, "Oh, we got all these different rates you could go into," and I guess they were at the time they were like recruiting hard trying to get cooks in.
Mhm.
He's like, "Oh, you want to be a cook?" And I just I looked at him and was like, "Buddy, that's not going to work out good for anybody involved. Like, unless I can order pizza or Chinese food and have it delivered, we're fucked." So, he's like, "Oh, well, you could learn." I'm like, nope, no can do. So I was looking at some of the other rates and I saw marine science technician. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, that's another great rate. Like, you got to be like smart to do that one, but you can, be saving like little oily ducks and helping the environment. And, you also get opportunities to drive fast boats and jump out of helicopters. I was like, shoot guns. I'm like, fuck yeah, man, sign me up. I want to do this. That sounds awesome as a part-time job. So I was like, I was so excited. I'm like, I'm going to be a marine science technician. This is awesome. So I went to boot camp at 27, I think at the time.
Wow. Okay.
So I was like the old mother hen of the
Yeah.
group.
The elder recruit.
Yeah. But I was like, I don't know if you could picture like the kid that always sat in the front of the room and raised their hand and asked a million questions. Like
Yeah.
I was that dork.
Do you remind the teacher of the homework she forgot to
Yep,
collect? Oh, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
Now,
so we
now
show
that that begs a question, if I may, real fast. So like in my experience in Army boot camp and stuff, it was, primarily anywhere between 17 and 20 something years old is like the bulk of. And then you had a couple of those guys in their 30s with kids and stuff. And we had one guy who was like 41. He was at the top age bracket. And a few people that I've talked to so far, Koskis and stuff, it seems much more common for people to be a little bit older when they went
yeah.
in. Did you experience that? Was there a little few many older people, or was it still mainly like 18-year-olds and
Um, it was kind of a mix. We had a couple of older folks, like I say older folks by like early to mid 20s.
Mhm.
I mean, I still a bulk of them were, sort of that young, like right out of high school, late teens.
Yeah.
At least in the group that I had. Um, but I didn't know at the time that like with my college degree and stuff that I could have gone into like the short 3 week boot camp.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like,
You
oh,
guys have an option for that.
yeah, I guess there was. I mean, I didn't know anything about it at the time. So I did the regular 8 week boot camp, which in retrospect I was, much better off doing that. Like I'm glad that I did. And but yeah, I definitely like, man, I got so much flack in there. The one of my company commanders, he would always harass me. He was a YN2, so he was a E5, and I don't know, maybe 20 years old, 21 years old, something like that.
They got
And
E5
he
pretty
always,
quick then.
yeah, he always like talked about how he was a tactical yeoman, he was
Yeah.
in the shit, all this stuff, and I was like, oh man, you were in the shit, holy cow! Like I gotta follow your lead, right?
Yeah.
So so he just like bugged me the whole time or like would try to get me to I wasn't very good at like maintaining my military bearing or not laughing or smiling and stuff like that. So I ended up coming out of there with some really like nice looking arms because was always in a front leaning rest or pushing the ground. So,
Yeah.
but I remember going through there and being like, yeah, I'm gonna be a marine science technician. This is awesome. I'm gonna go on fast boats and jump out of helicopters and shoot guns and blah 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 blah. And then like, fast forward like 2 months, I finished boot camp and I'm going to my A school, so my advanced training here in Yorktown, Virginia. And I show up to class the first day and I'm like, oh, got my pens, got my pencils, I'm all ready. Sit down at my desk. And there's a whole bookshelf in front of me, and the whole bookshelf is filled with the Code of Federal Regulations and the transport of hazmat books. And I was like, man, that guy freaking duped me. Like this is supposed to be my fun, part-time job. Like I do this law stuff every day. And but it ended up working out really well because it was a easily transferable skill. Now, I would have never guessed, 10, 12 years later that I really at some point would have participated in all of those things that he told me that I would do.
Mhm.
So after all, ETC, I guess you were right. I do not know if that was actually your plan, but
So,
um,
so what actually is the job of the marine science? If it's not, like what he said, well, when you went to school, what would, like if you were to give it a description, what's the reality of what they do?
so like safety inspections,
Okay.
um, so containerized cargo, hazmat, like the stuff we did with you guys over in theater, right?
Hmm.
Making sure everything's packaged up and stored and segregated separately and that sort of stuff. Um, but they're also the folks that go out there for, we got the hurricane going on right now and
Hmm.
cleanup. They're the folks that are out there doing environmental compliance and pollution response and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So it's a more technical job because you're following all of like the federal guidelines, not like other jobs don't, but like, you're powered with your pen and your pad.
Gotcha.
Um, so you do that sort of stuff. You inspect like container ships and cruise ships and um, any other ships for, safety, security, like that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it is in there, but maybe not
Yeah,
just not as advertised.
not quite as advertised, no.
I
Um,
have a lot of friends that they signed up and the recruiter's like, you want to be a tank mechanic? Like, yeah, I want to work on tanks. All right, cool. And then they become kilos and they are tankers, which you do have to learn to work on the tank, but you're a tanker who goes to war to blow stuff up with tanks. And you thought you were just gonna work on tanks, So it's like, yeah, it's in there, it's part of it, but it's not, there's a lot more to it than just what they said.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there always is, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like, especially for us on the Coast Guard side of things, like, there's not as many coasties as there are in the New York City Police Department are there that there's cops.
Yeah.
So we're like super small. So, we end up doing 5, 6, 10 things at a time. I feel like the Coast Guard's motto is always like, do more with less. And we
Yeah.
pride ourselves on that, which we do, but eventually we break our people. So yeah, some of the stuff falls in line and then some of the stuff, doesn't. Kind of like our mission with you guys overseas. Like, we did a Coast Guard mission as far as inspecting hazmat and packaging containers and stuff, but we just did it in a combat theater. So,
In a sea of
guns,
sand instead of
war,
water.
yeah. All that stuff. It was just a trade-off job in a different location,
Yeah.
but cool experiences. So I
Well,
think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was say the last I had looked, this is a long time ago, the Coast Guard was only made up of like 30,000 people or something. Is that still similar today?
Probably somewhere around there. Yeah. I know that they're always are always actively recruiting to get our numbers up.
Mhm.
I can't tell you what an exact count is, but yeah.
Well, and I imagine the drawdowns affected the Coast Guard differently than the Army because the Army was, just get more numbers and create more BCTs, brigade command teams. We had to fight war. We need these. And then when war went away, we didn't need as many of those. So, like, we still needed people in necessary positions, but there was a
Yeah.
lot of extra positions created. And so, being a much larger entity means a lot more people got to go. Whereas
Yeah.
the Coast Guard, you guys have not that the Army doesn't have, but the Coast Guard has a much more regular, all the time on duty, all across the states kind of mission.
Yeah.
So I would think that the drawdowns are probably a little more of the reverse for you. You're like, no, like we still need more people. Please come help.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when it came to, overseas type work, like not only a handful of our teams or units actually went over there. So there's the Patrol Force of Southwest Asia, home base is in Bahrain, and they have the cutters that patrol over there and stuff, and a small base in Bahrain, and then uh, the port security units, which are reserve units, would go over, and they had a mission in Kuwait to help support the ships, and then do security over there as well. Um, but outside of that, like going into theater, it was really us, the raid team, so the redeployment assistance inspection detachment, and then there's a Middle East training team and another team that I can't remember the name right now. But I mean, in total, the raid team was the most boots on ground, I want to say, since the Vietnam War. And when the mission was wrapped up in 2015, there were only 256 of us that had done that in the course of, 14 years, something like that.
Wow.
12,
You're,
14
you're
years,
part
yeah.
of elite force.
Yeah, and then you take those numbers down even further, and I think at the end of it, I was one of 11 women to have gone over there and done that, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's very significant. You think the 1% of the way, you're probably the 0.1% of the 0.1%.
I'll trust your math on that one.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know, napkin math. I can do it real quick, whip it up. No, I mean that is, and that's part of the whole reason that even made me want to try and do this kind of thing because I feel like people should know that. I mean, you've done stuff, been places that not just most people won't go, but most women on top of that won't go, even more so, at least in our time.
Yeah.
That may expand in the future as more and more women are in the military, but I mean, I say it in jest, but at the same time, like you are a part of a very exclusive group that did a very small but very important. I say small, there were very few of us or very
Yeah.
few of you, but the scale at which it affects everything is much larger than I think people realize. And so I
Oh,
think more
absolutely.
people should know that.
Well, and I think too, like you're talking about the drawdown and stuff. Sorry, I can't help the dog in the background
No,
here.
you're fine.
Um, the I remember hearing when the raid mission was first started, when the Army came to the Coast Guard because their cargo was getting frustrated at the ports, meaning that it couldn't move anywhere because the paperwork wasn't done right, um, the stuff wasn't sealed right, whatever the case may be, and it was costing them millions and millions of dollars to sit in all these foreign ports. So all right, hey Coast Guard, you do this in country here, so can you come help us with this? Well, we need 400 people. And they're like, oh, okay, 400 people, cool. So we'll give you 25. Same, right? We do more with less. We got you.
Yeah, that'll work.
So the early teams they were reservists, so it was like I think even half that, like maybe like 12, 15 people that rotated every 6 months for the first couple of teams. And
Wow.
then they ended up splitting it like half active and half reserve. So like 12 and 12 or 13 and 12, somewhere around there. And then they would train together, but there would always be an overlap of a couple of months between like the reserve and the active teams for
Mhm.
continuity.
So
Um,
left seat, right seat, kind of
yeah,
with experience
exactly.
bringing in the new people.
Um,
Well, at least they had the foresight to do that.
yeah. And I don't know. I kind of think like having been over there and like seeing how, I was rated team 14, so there's lots of folks that came before us. And 13 and 14, that's Thunderdan's team. So I'm sure the audience will see his video
I,
on
I,
here.
I hope if we have an audience, you flatter me by saying we will, but if we do, I cannot wait for a reaction to him because he's a colorful one for sure.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, there's lots of stories there.
So
You have
we
like a three-way call, then we could probably piggyback off of some of it because it'll jog
that
my memory.
that would be amazing to do again sometime in the future if we could work that out because he and I have already agreed. We went for 3 hours and was like, all right, we hit a kind of a natural break in his career and was like, do you mind if we make a part two? Because we've already been going for 3 hours. And like I have enough to make 4 episodes with just this alone if I wanted to split it up that way. And
Yeah.
he's like, hell yeah, let's do it. So
In true Thunderdan fashion.
yeah. So if we may, back up a little bit. So you went through school, you find out what the reality of the job is,
Mhm.
and where do you go to next? Is it back to the reserve unit or did you go on to something else?
No, so I went back to the reserve unit and I was stationed in Sector New York in Staten Island.
Okay.
And started learning my trade, started doing inspections on ships there, um, compliance inspections of facilities, waterfront facilities that, manage, package, transport, hazmat.
Hmm.
And I liked it. I liked getting back into the military aspect of things and working my little weekend job.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was pretty cool. But
And were you continuing to do the paralegal full-time stuff at the same
I
time as that?
I did, yep. Yeah, and I actually ended up having to sort of like recuse myself on working on some of our case files
Hmm.
because we had at the law school we had represented one of the folks that was a prisoner down at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and I, wasn't sure, what was what at the time. So I just stopped working on those cases when I joined because of,
Gotcha.
potential conflicts there. So
That makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, but it was good. Like I loved my law school job. We had a really good group of people there, folks I still stay in touch with now. And it was good. I think I just sort of hit a ceiling in my civilian job there
Hmm.
as far as whether I was either gonna just stay a paralegal or go to law school, which was the plan.
Hmm.
Um, but then I realized like how expensive law school actually is and and how much I liked doing what I was doing. So like some of the associate professors and stuff that I worked with, like they're Harvard law grads and Columbia grads, all this stuff. And I'm like, well, that's cool. But like you're not making a ton more money than I am right now. So
Yeah.
I don't really know about all that yet. Um, but the Coast Guard thing was neat. I was like, all right, let me, kind of roll with this for a little bit. And I stayed on the reserve side for 2 years, I want to say. So I graduated A school in March of 2008. And then I did my first like mobilization for the Coast Guard mobilization deployment. um, in July of 2010. And that was for Deepwater Horizon, the oil spill down on the Gulf Coast.
Okay. What'd you do
So,
down there?
um,
Washing ducks?
oil spill recovery. I was on the on the beaches on the shoreline, going out there um, looking for oil, patties and stuff like that. Not necessarily personally cleaning it up, but managing teams of contractors that were doing that sort of work.
Okay.
And like scouting different areas to see where there was damage and where we needed to like send teams for environmental cleanup.
Okay.
Um, so that was pretty cool. Got to, experience a different area of the US down in the Gulf Coast there.
Yeah.
And
Over my neck of the woods.
yeah, it was interesting though. Like I remember we'd have to go out to like one of the barrier islands to do some cleanup and stuff. And there's this guy like, in like a not a pontoon boat, but like a small like flat bottom boat that was taking us out to like different spots.
Hmm.
And super nice guy, local. Um and I remember him asking me, he was like, "Oh, you're from New Jersey." He's like, "Do you know Snooki?" And I was like, "I don't know Snooki. We're not all like the Jersey Shore."
One of those stereotypical, like, everybody asks military
Yeah,
people, did you shoot somebody? Or just various examples of that. I guess that's the Jersey's version of that. Anywhere you go, is what they ask.
yeah. I was just surprised. I was like, not he wasn't the typical guy that I would expect to, know what that was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
But
mean, at the time, everybody talks about it. It was big. I mean,
yeah,
and I mean, you think about Deepwater Horizon thing. I mean, that was huge. It was all over the news. I remember. I don't remember where I was at that time, but hearing about it a ton.
yeah,
I guess that's something that's just kind of inherent in all of us, though, because being from Florida, the one that I get all the time, we just had the hurricane recently. So everywhere I go, especially during basic and AIT, everybody from all across the country are like, what, you live down there in Florida with hurricanes? Like, yeah. They're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know, sit at home, play video games and the power till the power goes out, and turn on a flashlight and read a book. Play board games. Like, what do you mean? What do I do? Hurricanes are just a normal thing for me, whereas for them, that's wild.
yeah.
So I
We
guess
gotta
it's
stockpile the house.
yeah, I guess it's just that inquisitive part that's in
Yeah.
all of us to want to know those things.
Yep. Absolutely.
So where'd you go
Well,
from there? I'm
while
sorry,
we
go
were
ahead.
down there in 2010, 2011, I was down there for almost 9 months.
Okay.
I mean, there were still like cleanup and stuff going on from Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah,
That was what, 2005, something like that.
I'll trust you on that.
I don't
I'm
know.
terrible
Don't
with dates.
necessarily trust me on that one, but
Dates I'm awful with. So
but yeah, like we crossed paths with people that were still there, like trying to work with folks and who had lost homes and trying to rebuild but couldn't rebuild, all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
So it was an interesting time to be there, like, two devastating events uh hitting that area there. So but it was nice to be part of the cleanup and the rebuild, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah. And just helping people. That's kind of what drives me, what makes me happy.
It's a noble drive.
Yeah. I guess it's good and bad sometimes because it's good because it's good to help people. We should, we should treat everybody a little kinder and then maybe like this world will be a little bit better. But on the flip side, I have a tendency to get like emotionally invested with whatever I have going on. So,
Yeah,
it either if you're super emotionally invested in it, then, it often becomes your problem because if somebody else is like, man, I don't care, not my problem, they're like, oh, well, it's not that guy's problem, but you
yeah.
care. Oh, so that must be your problem. So, you fix it.
Yeah. I suppose you sign on for a certain level of that if you take on the job, like your job is to do the cleanup and such.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's just kind of like that mentality of mine is kind of gone throughout my career, no matter where I was at. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, sorry, I got like a million things going through my mind. I'm like,
No,
oh,
you're
am I talking
totally.
too fast? Am I talking too
Yeah,
slow?
I can just edit all that out. That's fine.
Uh,
No, I try not to edit anything other than like if there were 10 minutes of silence, I would probably cut that out. But
You just stand here and be like,
yeah, I had a buddy in our last thing. He would say the same sentence like 4 or 5 times in a row sometimes, and I would cut that down to maybe two every once in a while.
yeah,
So it's like I don't want to eliminate any of the content from it or people feel like they missed something, but it's like, if there's 10 minutes of dead air, no one's going to want to watch, just
yeah,
staring silently for 10 minutes.
yep. Hey, can you give me like 1 minute real quick? Let me just cover this guy up real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah, go ahead.
I tried to like make sure everybody got taken care of before so I could be on this call. And it never fails. Like, especially my little old man Jackson here. I've told you before, he's 15, he's paralyzed from the waist down, and but he doesn't realize like he's paralyzed. Like he just wants to move all the time.
Hmm.
Which is cool, but like I have to facilitate moving him. So
Yeah,
that becomes challenging, especially when I have my own challenges with movement.
yeah,
So today he's just like, I don't want to really be on your schedule. I want to
yeah.
be on like my schedule. So
No, that's totally fine. Life happens. Like I say,
yeah. He's
that
like,
stuff
that's
can
a
all be, yeah, I can work around that stuff. It's not a
okay.
problem.
Yeah. He's like, oh, it's 11:30. I think I'm hungry now. Now I want to eat my breakfast.
Even though I normally eat at, another
Like
time.
like
Yeah.
8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Not
one of the things that's always stuck with me years and years ago, one of my sergeants told me nothing ever happens on your time.
yeah.
So once you learn to accept that and just work with it, life gets a lot less frustrating.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, one of the things that I like, I've never been a super timely person. I remember my friends in even in my early 20s would always joke around because I'd always be late to everything. So my friend Kelly would call me like broken watch or speed bump or something like that.
yeah,
But and then now like after having Parkinson's, now I realize that like now I really can never get to anything on time.
yeah.
I'll
Now,
plan.
now, now people will be sympathetic when I show up late.
Maybe everybody but my wife.
Well, and for
What do you
her,
mean you're late?
well, she has to deal with it all the time. So I'm
She
sorry,
does.
I shouldn't say deal with it all the time, but she experiences it much more frequently than others. So I'm sure it builds up and can get frustrating.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's been a couple of moments where it's like we had to reschedule here, there, and I'm like, dang it. But then, like I say, nothing happens on your time. It works out when it works out. I could have not been here this morning because of hurricane.
Yep.
Luckily, I'm able to do this, so I want to take advantage of it when I can.
Yeah, I've really had to like learn to adjust a bit to like what I want to do or what I think I can do
Hmm.
is much different than what I can actually do.
Yeah,
And that's been like a huge adjustment and change for me. Like just getting up and going somewhere or like, you know, making plans on the spur of the moment, like just doesn't work out as well.
gotcha.
So it's become interesting. Funny at times. But yeah, interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
So one thing that I forgot to talk about was Dan and I joke around about this a lot. So so my Coast Guard career like was almost over before it even started.
Hmm.
And so I had gotten into some trouble when I was in Yorktown, at my training school. And there was a um I had a team leader, like a class leader, who was another yeoman, so admin guy, E6 type. And he was just like the epitome of like a guy's guy,
Hmm.
this Texan. thought his stuff didn't stink, like God's gift to women kind of thing. And we definitely like had some issues in class and tried to, without getting into too much detail, tried to give him some better expectations on, what a leader should look like and stuff. And that didn't really go well at the time. So he thought that, a fair thing to sort of retaliate back was to like sexually harass me and sexually harass one of the other girls in our team.
Hmm.
And it it got to the point where it was like super uh like obvious about what was going on and stuff like that. And I remember like we were just a couple of weeks from graduation, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And I ended up like going to our school chief or our like school instructor or whatever and saying what was going on, like, hey, you know, there's some shit going on here and like, you know, this is where it started and I asked them not to do this and then it went further you know, and then this guy thought that it was appropriate to, show me essentially porn of him and, his then soon to be ex-wife as he described it.
Interesting.
And give me some conversations about, what a woman's role is.
Okay.
So it it sparked this whole other thing. So I'm like, all right, I did my part, right? Like I reported, I did the sexual harassment thing and everything's going to be okay. And then like just a couple days before graduation, like me and this other girl who I had hooked up with in training, um we get pulled in and essentially like I get read my rights. And so this guy during his investigation for, dereliction of duty, sexual harassment, I don't know, government travel card fraud, like he was just an overall shitbag. He ended up being like, oh, well, this person and this person are hooking up and they're gay. And it was like before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
That was gonna be my next
So
question was
yeah, yeah. So his stuff ended up being like going, was still going on, but it was like now going on quietly because they're like, oh my God, there's gays among us. What do we do? Get rid of them all.
yeah.
So then we took center stage for like the main event. And I was really kind of surprised at how like all of that had gone down.
Hmm.
Um, Long story short, I ended up being able to put some of my legal skills to use in, following the like sexual harassment procedures, and then eventually ended up taking my case like up to the Department of Homeland Security to appeal the decisions. Um, and in the end, like the only thing bad that happened to me at the time was I got masted, which you gotta like go before I don't know if you what the equivalent is in the army, but it's like the
Sounds like going in front of a board.
yeah, like the captain, you sit in front of the captain and this is what happened and you can have a rep with you and
Okay. Yeah.
and then you get your punishment. So I got a letter of reprimand. And I remember like I still see that thing in my record sometimes and I'm like it just like bugs me because I got a letter of reprimand for like being out after hours or something like that, or being in somebody's room after hours. And like the whole group of us, including this guy, would always be hanging out, whether it was like out at a bar or, in somebody else's room or watching movies or whatever the case may be. But at the time, the folks that were there that decided to investigate this, like, did not look at anybody else or anything else that was going on. It just took center stage to like, you know, oh, well, this person said this about them. So now
Hmm.
we're going to like give them the boot. So it was really interesting. And I was like, that was my first experience with the Coast Guard. So I was, leaving boot camp and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be an MST. This is all great and wonderful. And I get to school and I'm like, shit, there's a bunch of legal books. This is going to suck. But then it ended up working out good. And then, I get thrown in some sexual harassment and I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to get kicked out of the Coast Guard.
Not a great first impression.
No, I was like, crap, man. That was short-lived.
Yeah.
But and like unfortunately the other person on the other end of it, the other female did end up getting kicked out of the Coast Guard at the time, and it was very unfortunate. Um I had the I had the opportunity to speak with her for the first time in like years and years a few months ago about everything. And I just, felt sort of like shitty about how that had happened. But on the bright side, I now knew what that whole process was to advocate for myself or to advocate for others if they needed to, um, sort of going down the line.
Hmm.
So I was like, all right, well, this is a bump in the road, but you want to know what, Coast Guard? I still feel like you and I have a future together. So I'm going to give you a second chance.
Yeah.
You may think that you're giving me a second chance, but it's really me giving you a second chance. So prove to me that you are worth this.
Yeah.
Um, there's always hiccups along the way, in anybody's career or anything that happens, but I think overall, it went really good. But I definitely have had to go about things the hard way sometimes,
Hmm.
um, to sort of like get to the other side. My mom always jokes with me. She's like, you can't just do anything easy, can you? And I'm like, apparently not. I don't know
Yeah.
why. What did I do in a previous life? But,
No, I'm right there with you, man.
yeah.
Well, one of
So,
the things I stress so much to new people is just knowing the basic rules. So like in no way am I trying to compare what happened to me to you, but just I used to get in trouble for knowing the rules. And I asked my squad leader one time when I was in Georgia about going on leave for the weekends. And it was just like, hey man, so when we're out at 5 on Friday, can I take off because I have leave for the weekend? And let me take you outside. And he starts reprimanding me and stuff, yelling. I'm like, I don't know what you're yelling at me about. Like, this is the rules unless the commander has, some kind of I don't remember what they're called now, but commander's rules for the unit that goes
yeah,
outside. Like Army regulation assumes at 5 o'clock, if we're released, the weekend started, we're officially on leave, we can go.
yeah,
And he's like, he got all mad about it. And so I went to my platoon leader and asked about it. I was like, hey man, like I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the rules right. He's like, nah, dude, you're fine. Friday afternoon when you get released, you can go. I'll go talk to him. And he's like trying to get me in trouble when he was wrong just
yeah,
because he didn't know what the rule was.
yep,
So like you say, I'm sure your paralegal experience was very handy in you researching and understanding what those rules meant, and that is very important because you'll have bumps along the road in your military career where someone who does not understand the rules will try to get you in trouble for something they are clearly wrong about.
yep,
And I'm glad you were able to use that to your advantage, and I'm sorry that you had that experience. That especially, I shouldn't say especially, but it's terrible that it happened just in general, but to happen so early on, like you
yeah,
say, you could have just walked away right there, and I don't think anyone would have faulted you for it.
yeah. It's interesting about like that time now because even a couple of years ago we're having the conversations about um same-sex marriage is legal now and
Hmm.
getting your spouse on your benefits and all that stuff is just second nature, right?
Yeah.
Like no big deal. And then we have the transgender piece of folks coming in and like making the rules for all of that. Um, and it's odd sometimes to think that like 2008 timeframe that's still at that point, you know, I don't even know how many thousands of service members were either um, separated from the service or
Hmm.
hiding under hiding who they were because of this rule at the time.
Yeah.
That, you know, just a couple short years later, they're like, oh, yeah, no big deal. We're all good now. Come on. But that but that thing changed so many people's changed the lives of so many people.
Mhm.
Um, that is just, it's just like I say these things to some of the younger folks that come in. I've tried to use like my lessons learned, so to say, life experience, and they're like, wow, really? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And we would probably say the same thing about, talking with folks before us, like
Yeah.
especially, things that they had gone through, and females that have been in the service for so long, that like what they had to go through before it was more common practice to have women in all of these different career fields and stuff like that. So just sort of the evolution of things is kind of interesting to see it throughout your own career,
Yeah.
watching history unfold and stuff. Um,
Do you remember what year they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
we were, I want to say it was 2012, 13, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
I want to say I was in for a year or two when they announced it and it went
Yeah.
away.
Because I remember when so I went through that whole thing, right? Did my math, all that stuff. And I'm like, all right, back to work, just, sort of keep my personal life down or whatever.
Mhm.
And and then when we were getting ready so I did the oil spill. While I was at the oil spill, I heard about this raid team. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. And one of the driving factors for me was that I remembered having conversations with my dad, and he was a security police, so police officer in the Air Force and a dog handler, and like he wanted to do all of the things, like Air Force Special Forces, or whatever, like the tactical cool man shit was, like that's what he wanted to do. And having those conversations and stuff like that. So I was like, wow, this is like a really cool and unique opportunity. Like, I'm going to sign up for this.
Mhm.
Maybe I can like, take my dad's memory with like, hey, dad, you're coming with me. We're going overseas. You're going to get there.
Yeah,
So, but I didn't tell my family at the time because, you know, while folks, I don't know what it was like on the Army side, but I imagine that there were probably folks going overseas that didn't want to go overseas at the time, right?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But on our side, because our team was so small and the experience was, so limited, like I had to apply for the team. I had to do an interview, like a face-to-face interview. And then there was like a whole selection process. So to get vetted and everything. And then, I ended up getting selected and was going to go overseas. So I had just spent 9 months in Mississippi, and I came home for 3 weeks to tell my then girlfriend and my family that in 3 weeks I was shipping out to go to Afghanistan. That was
Surprise.
not a very easy conversation to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, I'm sure that didn't go over real great.
They're like, Afghanistan, but you're in the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard doesn't go overseas. It's the coast here. You protect the coast here. And I'm like, yeah, but they're like, well, I don't understand. Like, how can you get out of this? And I'm like, oh no, sorry, I can't get out of this. Duty calls, got to go.
Yeah, Coast Guard said.
Yeah, Coast Guard said, it took some time afterwards for me to be like, yeah, so I actually volunteered for that. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? My mom's famous phrase for me throughout growing up was always like, why are you tempting fate? Like, Mom, when it's my time, it's my time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I came home 3 weeks, and then we were all reporting to Virginia, um, to start the whole pre-deployment process. And I was like, all right, holy shit, this is going to be an experience. It'll be a cool adventure. Um, and I get into class the first day, and everybody's doing introductions and stuff like that. And I'm like, no shit, I'm the only girl here.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, I can hang with the guys. Most people, said I'm just, a 16-year-old boy at heart anyway. Um, So I get in there and it's like the first day of school, right? You're like looking around like, ooh, where should I sit? So right up in the front of the class, there's this very colorful looking fella sitting there, and he is like, "Hey, why don't you come over here, shipmate, and sit next to me? I'm Thunder Dan." And I'm like, "Thunder Dan, you are so cool. Look at your tactical boots and your shiny knife and your laces. I want to be like you." And it was a friendship from the beginning. So Thunder Dan took me under his wing, and we became buddies throughout the process. Um and it was pretty cool. But I can remember I'm like, all right, I feel like at this point, I've earned my spot in the Coast Guard. I was an E5 at the time, had some qualifications. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like I'm gonna go do this thing and it's gonna be great. So I remember like that first week when they're doing introductions and stuff like that, and I'm sitting next to cool guy Thunder Dan. So like nobody, no big deal for I'm gonna be good. And the commander that was running the team at the time, uh, like the team that was over there, and he was coming back to debrief the new guy that was gonna go over.
Okay.
So he pulls me aside and he's like, "So what are you doing here?" I'm like, I'm gonna inspect some hazmat. That's what I'm gonna do. Like, I'm an MST. This is what I do. This is my shit.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. So you're a female? And I'm like, yep, yep, that's confirmed. He's like, all right, well, females do nothing but cause trouble. So, like, I don't really want you on the team. And I'm like, I got picked for the team. Like, I'm smart. I'm really good at this job. And he's like, I don't really care. Like, if you're a girl and you want to go overseas on this team of guys, like, you're probably just going to sleep around. Like, do you have a husband? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have kids? Like, are you, going to sleep with the whole class? Like, and I was like, wow, I feel like these are probably really inappropriate questions. I mean, I'll answer them because I don't really have a good filter to lie very well.
Hmm.
But I also feel like he probably shouldn't be asking me these. So I
Yeah.
was like, all right, all right. Like, I'm trying to stay positive here, bro. But he just kind of kept at me like, yeah, you know, I didn't want any girls on the team after the last one, and this is going to be it. Like, you better not cause any problems. You better not have any issues. There's going to be no females on the team after this. Like, you know, you're nothing but bad news. And I was like, really? I'm pretty sure that just because I have a vagina doesn't mean that I am bad news.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have lots of people that have those in your close, proximity. So, so lo and behold, I was just like, man, like that was a real dick thing to do. Try and make me feel not welcomed or whatever. But I went back over to my friend Thunder Dan, and he's like, I got you. That guy's a dick. Fuck him. I'm like, yeah, fuck him. So, so I was just like, man, all right, well, we're still gonna do this thing here. So, we go through our training, and it was pretty damn cool. It was like getting right back to what my recruiter said I was gonna do. Like, I got to shoot lots of guns for the first time in my Coast Guard career.
Yeah.
We went through aviation training at Fort Eustis in Virginia
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
So, doing our Black Hawk training and our Chinook training, learning how to get on and off and combat landings and all that sort of fun stuff. I was
That's
like,
cool.
I'm jumping out of helicopters. I'm shooting guns. I don't know where the boats are, but I guess they're coming at some point. So, so I was like, oh, sweet. And the job ended up being pretty good. I mean, it definitely it had its good times and its bad times, but I would have to say that those couple of months that we spent together in Iraq, like that that time was the most memorable, out of all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for being in theater, like there's no other group of people that I would have rather been with. Like if I could have spent my whole deployment with our like crew from Adder, it would have been awesome.
And we tried, man. I know Gerdo tried to set us up where if we went to Afghanistan, we could all go together, and they nixed that. And I mean, I tried to even go to Afghanistan after they sent us back to Kuwait, and they were like, "No, you're not going to Afghanistan." I'm like,
Yeah,
"All right, whatever. We need people there, not sitting here doing nothing on the port of Kuwait." But yeah, I'll sit
yep.
here twiddling my thumbs. You want to pay me for that? Whatever. Um, but no, I completely agree. I think we got really, really fortunate with the group of people that we had over there, and I think it worked out awesome. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I had like I started out in Kuwait, like running the office and like keeping track of the ops going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and being the CO's right hand lady. And then I was like, man, I was like, sir, you can't keep me here forever. Like I need to get out there and like do stuff. So
you trained me to how to jump out of a helicopter. Now let me go do
yeah, right? Let me do it. So I was like, listen, because there was all this stuff like, and like when we got there, I don't know if you had in your pre-deployment training, everything was like, you know, everybody's assaulting everybody, like sexual assaults are
Oh
rampant,
yeah,
you
that
know?
the what do they call it? The body armor bandit or whatever. Like somebody's
Yeah,
running
yeah,
around knocking people out with body armor and raping them. And
yep. So I know that like my CO and my XO were like, oh my God, like we have to protect her, And I was like, you got to let me go. Everybody's at risk here.
yeah.
So so I'm like, all right. So then I get to they let me go and I went out to Kandahar, Afghanistan. That was
Mhm.
my first spot. And I was there with my buddy Demorit,
Yeah.
who you know.
I remember the more.
And
Yeah.
so Demo and then uh uh Al and this other guy who I won't name by names right now, but he was the NCO I see there.
Mhm.
And I remember I was like, all right, well, this is cool. Like that's a pretty decent group of people. And I was surprised like at how big Kandahar was,
Yeah.
like for being a big NATO base and stuff. So we we had a decent group there. At least in the beginning, um like some of the army guys that we were there with, although I can't remember any of their names now, so we were not nearly as close as our group in Adder. Um,
Those dudes
but we'd
suck.
go
We
out and
don't.
do
We
like a
don't.
lot. We do like a lot of missions, like right on Kandahar Air Base, or we do short jaunts
Mhm.
to some other places. And
And were you doing the same thing? Like for those who may not know, the container inspections, hazmat
yep,
inspections, all that.
yep, container inspections, hazmat inspections, and it was kind of weird, right? Because like, all right, so going back to like you having to ask, like, hey, can I go on leave now at this time or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Like, we're used to like our military lives being like regimented, like what you can do and what you can't do. Well, you take 26 coasties and you throw them in the middle of the desert, and like, here's some like handful of loose rules, and then
Yeah.
figure it out. And we're
Yeah.
like, I mean, okay, you want us to figure it out? Like, we'll figure it out, but you might not like how we figure it out.
Yeah.
So like I come home and tell stories like, and just go down to Ali Salim or wherever the air terminal was, and like just stick your name on a list and hop on a helicopter, and you'd be fob hopping for a couple of weeks at a time, and then get back and then just go fly this place or this place, and like wait a minute, you like, well, who did your unit go? Like, no. It's like, me and Joe Schmo, or just me sometimes when it's like going back and forth between countries.
Hmm.
Like, you did that all by yourself? I'm like, well, I mean, I did it with the assistance of whoever was driving or flying the thing, but yes, I did. Um,
I just signed up Space A, so if there was a
yeah,
seat on the
yeah,
plane, I hopped on.
yep. But it was just like such a unique thing. And like, because coasties are used to doing more with less, like we're kind of like the smart kids that had too much time on their hands, like what can I get into, right?
Mhm.
So I remember like some of the shenanigans from Iraq were definitely like representative of that, Thunder acquiring different modes of transportation for us and fuel cards
Yeah.
and all kinds of stuff like that. Um,
Showing up with a whole front deck. Uh, that
yep.
butters. Yep. It just all the wood. Just set up a little theater out front and yeah.
Yep, cigars and movie nights. I mean, like that was the best. We'd all be sitting out there and like folks would be walking by the deck and like looking at us chilling with the Bose radio and watching some movies and smoking cigars like it was nothing. You almost forget where you were and then all of a sudden you hear like boom, like everything rattles and shakes and you're like, "Ah, shit." And Thunder's like dragging he's out there in his Hugh Hefner silk robe,
Yeah.
like dragging that in his Bose radio and cigar into like the little what are those little shelters called where like little bomb things?
Yeah, I could have told you before you asked me.
Ah, shit.
But yeah, the little shelled little concrete toasters.
Yeah, yeah. Where we
Yep.
spent lots of time.
Yep.
But
The
yeah, and that'd be
bunkers.
like
The
the wake up.
bunkers.
The bunkers, yep, in the
Yep.
bunkers.
Yeah, there were times where it would have been nice for because we had a similar being a small team out in the middle of there, and our brass was down in Kuwait, but we still had some more people to answer to than you guys did, so we couldn't just like wander off on our own. But it was fascinating the things that we got into because I remember especially when we were in Adder and we had the 25 ID. I'm pretty sure, yeah, 25 ID. They were the ones who owned that base. It's that infantry division, and
Yeah.
they're infantry, and they are always, like, one of my biggest comebacks when anybody would give me crap, I'd be like, "Well, have you ever told a colonel no?" And they're like, "What do you mean tell a colonel no?" I'm like, "Dude, I tell colonels no like every day. Get the fuck out of my face." And to them, it's just mind-boggling to
Yeah.
be anywhere outside of those strict rules. And so having guys yell at you about not having your shirt tucked in and stuff, it's like, man, like I know, but come on, dude. Like, really? You're gonna yell at me about my shirt when we're out here in the desert getting bombed and stuff? Like, shut up.
4 inches deep in mud, like on hour 16 of loading up jingle trucks.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, those were some good times. Interesting. I can remember the guys picking me up in Adder and like Thunder was so excited that he finally got me there
Yeah.
and Steve was so excited and I get in the car and like throw my crap in the back of the truck and like I get in, I squeeze in between them and like the entire back, like the cab of the truck is filled like floor to ceiling with Monster cans.
Yeah.
Thunder would just buy cases and cases of Monster from like the
Little PXs on
exchange
top.
there or
Yeah.
whatever, PX, and just like toss it in the back of the truck or whatever.
Yeah.
I think between that and all the fire extinguishers that we ended up like acquiring
Yeah.
from inspections and stuff like that, there may have been there may have been several like joyrides around Adder with like fire extinguisher foam going out the
Yeah.
back of the truck.
Oh man, you know what? We should have done the office chair thing. You sit in it and turn them on and spin you around and stuff. Can't believe
Yeah.
we never did that.
Do you remember when we were filling up balloons with like was it like lighter fluid? We were filling them up with some shit and then like
I don't remember balloons.
I think it was balloons. Maybe it wasn't actually balloons. Maybe it was like rubber gloves. I have pictures somewhere of
Yeah.
us in the office. I don't know if it was Butter's idea or somebody else's that we like did that and then we set them on fire or something like that.
I mean, I don't remember that. It's totally possible, but I remember stuff like flying around the little remote control helicopters and
Yeah.
um I don't know if you had gotten there yet when we covered Gerdo's desk with mayonnaise, shenanigans like that. Were you there?
I don't remember mayonnaise. I
So
remember like covering his desk with other things while we were there.
yeah, so Gerdo hates mayonnaise, and like so much so that when we would sit down at the defect to eat lunch, if it was close to him, he'd like take out his pen and push it away. And so one time we covered his desk. We collected mayonnaise packets for like 2 weeks, and we covered his desk. We put it in all his drawers, and we were taping it like underneath the handles on his chair, so he would just continuously find mayonnaise everywhere. Um, we set up, he had his laptop where the top of it would close, but it would still go to his external monitor. And so
Yeah.
we put mayonnaise all in there, and then we messed with the laptop where he'd have to open it up. And so he
Yeah.
clicks it open. He's like, "Well, more mayonnaise." And yeah, yeah, lots of shenanigans. Oh man, Sergeant D, were you there when we taped his cat card to the roof?
Yes.
Yeah, he freaked out about that. He was so mad. He couldn't find his cat coming back, and because he had left it in the computer and we taped it to the ceiling, and he was so upset. We're like, dude, it's right up there. We all got in so much trouble for that one. Fun times for sure.
I know. I remember so I probably was like the most fit at Adder because I was always out running with Thunder and Butters.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Thunder tells a story, and he probably tells it much better than I will tell it because he is a good storyteller. But we were out running one night, and Butters like found a new route, and he's like, "Hey, I got a new route. We're gonna take the shortcut through here." And we're like, "All right." So it's dark, and I don't even know how many miles we ran at that point, 10, 12 miles, whatever it was, because that was like the fun thing that we did. And he's like, "Oh, come on, guys, right through here." And like we're going through, we're running up, and it's like a checkpoint, and
Mhm.
there's flags, and we're like, "Butters, those aren't American flags." He's like, "Oh, no, no, it's okay, it's okay. I've gone through here before." We're like, "Okay." Like we get closer, and we're in our little gray Coast Guard shirts with our yellow reflective belts on, and our shorts, and jogging through, and like it was like the Iraqi compound in there or whatever. And they're looking at us like, who the hell are these tools, you know? And I'm like, Butters, I don't think we can be here. Thunder's like, Butters, what are you doing? You're gonna get us killed, man. And Butters like, it's okay, guys, come on, just follow me. It's all good. And then like we're going through, and he's like, hi, like waving at the guys, and they're just like, I don't know what to do with this.
I can
Crazy
I
Americans.
absolutely see Butters just naively, absent-mindedly, like just like, yeah, man, it's fine.
It's
Like
fine, let's
nothing bad will
go.
happen.
Me and Dan
Yeah.
are just looking at each other, and we're like, well, this is going to be a good story to tell later on. Either we're going to get arrested and it's going to be an international incident, or it'll be okay.
Yeah, you guys did do a lot. I remember Dan, it brings back memories of him and his little toe shoes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he penguin flapped when he ran and
Yep.
just slapping around for miles and miles at a time. That dude would run for days. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you went to Afghanistan and you were doing the raid stuff, and then you came to us and we were doing the raid stuff. And so we're getting close to the end because you weren't with us quite as long. You came over in Adder, right? You didn't go to Basra.
Yeah. I came over and at her.
Okay, because we had a whole different raid group in Basra, and they weren't in the office with us like you guys were.
Yeah.
Um, so we get to that. Things are getting towards the end. Everything's shutting down. Um, where did I spoke to a couple other people about where they went. Where did you go after all that? Like when Iraq shut down, we moved on. Did you continue raid or go to Afghanistan?
So no, I mean, I came out of Afghanistan and then went with you guys, and then we were the last ones closing out Adder there into Crit. Um, and then went back to Kuwait,
Mhm,
and um did a bunch of the like movement of the stuff that was coming back out of Iraq, coming through the port there down at
mhm,
Shuaibah.
mhm.
So I ended up spending a lot of time at Shuaibah. and living over at AJ.
Yeah.
Let's see, what was that? That was like December, right? Like right
Yeah,
before
we
Christmas. So
December
we did that.
18th was when we left
Yeah.
Iraq.
Um, and then we came back and I remember David. Remember he got that spit and we roasted a pig for
Oh, yeah,
Christmas.
yeah. I missed out on that because I went home for Christmas, but I remember them doing that. Yeah.
Yep. I have pictures of us like sitting there smoking a cigar and like turning this pig. And everybody was like, how the hell did you get a pig into Kuwait and are roasting it on Christmas?
You guys, because
And
you guys
just
went to like the machine shop or something and asked if they would build you a barbecue spit,
that
right?
yeah, that wasn't us. That was Gerdo and
I want to say our first sergeant actually helped work on that because that was like
yeah.
his big thing of like morale, wearfell,
Yep.
recreation. Like I'm gonna get everybody, even though that unit's like it sucked being there and everybody hated it. And
Yep.
oh, we're gonna have a spit roast and everybody's gonna love it. And it was
Yep.
like, I mean, I'm sure it was fun, but you still suck, and this place still sucks, and all the brass still sucks here. So whatever.
We tried to make the most of it. Like, getting it's all about like the group of people that you have, no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
Um, they really kind of make or break it. Like, um, and we filtered around so much, right? Like, I think that was like one of the different things about, or that was sort of unique to like us and our team is that like we just went to so many, and you guys probably were similar in some respects. Like your skill set is a small amount of people in comparison to, the larger amount that are there to, do whatever
Hmm.
they're doing. Um, us support types of folks. Um, that like we're constantly, moving around. Like, yeah, you might be in Kuwait, but then you might go up to, Afghanistan and be in Bagram for like a couple of weeks, or, you know, go down to uh go down to Bahrain or like whatever the need was. We were just constantly in and out. It was a constant rotation. Um, and then during that time, like December, January timeframe, I remember our XO teaming up with the folks down in Bahrain to do this like we called it like the Adopt a Coastie program.
Hmm.
So it was like folks that were, on the ships or whatever, or like in Bahrain that weren't actively on the ships, like to give them a chance to like come up and see what it was like in theater. Which, sounded like, one of those good fairy sprinklings. But in reality, like they didn't go through all of the same type of training that we were going through to like to do this sort of
Hmm.
thing. So we spent a lot of time like I guess sort of mentoring and taking on new young folks and telling them what we do and all this sort of stuff. And some of them were interested, some of them were like, oh, this is boring, but hey, now I get to be like cool guy and say I went here or I went here and did this and this. So,
Yeah.
it was what it was at the time. But but yeah, we were, I mean, like my portion of the team was only there for another 2 months because we left at the end of February to go
Okay.
back home. So I remember like it was mid-February. Me and after all that running I did with Thunder in Iraq, we the Camp Buring Marathon was like mid-February. So me and my friend Doug Williams, uh, who was one of the reservists on our team, we went out there and we ran that marathon together in February. And I ended up like I had jacked up my hip when I was in Afghanistan the first time, or when I was in Afghanistan, and then I think all the running just like made it worse. So, but that was like kind of our last like big hurrah
Mhm.
there, was doing that race, and then everything just kind of like slowed down afterwards from that. But I think a lot of time that I spent in Kuwait was being the only female on the team kind of had its perks because a lot of people were going through shit, whether it was separation from families, whether it was losses that occurred at home while they were away, um, births of kids, like, you name it, just life, right? Um, and I've always generally been like a very approachable person. So, like, to sit and listen, like, listen to folks, tell me your
Mhm.
story. Let's talk about things. So, like, I spent I don't know how many miles walking around that track in AJ, like just talking with folks, crying, hugging it out, like whatever was going on. And I think that, some of that stuff they didn't necessarily want to talk to like with each other. It's not like, you know, I don't think pillow talk in the guy's shoe.
Well,
But it was stuff
it's
that they would talk to and open up about with me, which I think was pretty cool.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's one of those where I mean, there's the argument back and forth of females and the naturally more nurturing kind of idea, and whether that's true or not. I mean, a lot of people believe that, so that may have been kind of what they feel. It's a little easier, but there's also a lot of animosity. I mean, I didn't necessarily, this hasn't been my personal experience, but I've talked to people about how talking to other dudes is not easy because like dudes will make fun of you and stuff. But there's a lot of weird stuff. There's a YouTuber who talks about he was used to be special forces, and when he got out and started talking about being in the special forces, he was disowned by the special forces community because they were of this like, we don't talk about it with outsiders. We don't, and he's like, we have problems. Like
yeah,
we should be talking to people. We should be opening up and not just sitting in our little group of commisery and all just, you know, having terrible mental health together. Like that doesn't seem healthy. So
no,
it's really weird to in your experience, like when you saw those people that were willing to open up to you and talk to you about those kind of things, like I believe it because a lot of people talk about it and I've seen it, but it's just so like why do we do that? Why is it why is it hard to? Why do we feel like we can open up to someone like yourself, but then not open up to the other people who are all around us going through it together with us,
because everybody wants to be a tough guy. I mean, and I can say that I'm at fault for that too, right? Like after that conversation I had with with that commander when I first showed up to PDT training, I was like, oh shit, like I can't cause any trouble, like I have to be better,
Yeah.
I'm a female on the team, like I need to be better than everybody else. I need to like not better like flashy better, you know what I mean? But like to earn my place.
Yeah. Well, if
Um,
you go in with the idea, the expectation is, oh, you're the girl, you can't hack it anyway, so you have
yeah,
to show that you can, kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I would, I'd have like my tough side too, but I I had to show mine in different ways.
Hmm.
And we could talk about that in a minute. But I know so kind of get into that you were just saying about the special forces guys. So kind of fast forward to like the end of my career here. The last unit that I was at was relatively benign, easier job than the one I had before. I was going through my medical board. So just so I was going through a medical board. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 5 years ago. Um, I have strong feelings about, toxic exposures while we were overseas. Um, so so that's kind of how and why my career ended early.
Hmm.
But I was having a conversation with my commander. We were talking about because he had been on one of the early raid teams, and he's very like macho guy, tough guy. But would be like very tough like that in the office, like things that you probably should not say at this point in time were said. But he had brought up one time about, one of the guys on his team that ended up getting an award that he didn't think that he deserved because like, oh, well, they gave this guy an award, but the whole time that he was there in theater, like, he was upset and he was crying and like, whatever, like, ah, baby, kind of acting like that. And I'm like, the fuck, man, everybody cries. My CO on the team was crying with me. Uh, you know, like having those conversations with him, and I was an E5 and he was an O5.
Mhm.
Like, but just sort of that mentality, like, is still alive and well, even God, it's been 12 years or so since we've been there, that like, I turned to him and I looked and I was like, sort of like, that's the reason why we have problems.
Yeah.
Like that right there, you know? I one thing that I because we're talking about there, but so I when I came home, I didn't know anything about it at the time, but like so we came home in February. In May, I get a phone call one day. I'm at my civilian job and like, oh, hi, this is this is Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. And I'm like, hi, how can I help you? Like, okay. Didn't really like click that this is an important person at
Yeah.
first. And he's like, oh, I want to, call and let you know you were selected for this award and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool, cool, cool. Like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
And
Is
I
this a
remember
scam
like,
call? Like,
yeah, I was like, I'm like, am I being like pranked right now or something?
Dan,
So
that's you, isn't it?
yeah, right. Um, but but it ended up being like this amazing honor and opportunity that I was selected as the Coast Guard Reserve Enlisted Person of the Year, which I found out later on is like a pretty big deal. And that's why the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard was calling to tell me that. Um, as I went through the award ceremony and going through stuff at home afterwards, like, going through the motions of things and being like, wow, like I don't know that I really earned this. Like I myself was going through stuff while I was there, and I remember keep like looking back to, before I came to Adder, I was at Kandahar, like it started out really good and then it went really south, like quick. And I'm glad, conversations with Thunder like tried to, assist me coming over to Iraq. But the long and short of it was I ended up with an E6 NCOIC who was doing some shady stuff and wanted me to be a part of it. And I couldn't. I was like, no, no, thank you. And I was told that I wasn't a team player.
Yeah.
Um, so some of the other folks that were involved in his shady business, was some army contractor and they became good friends with a high ranking officer from the UAE that was there.
Wow.
And he used to like take our guys and bring them into their compound and wine them and dine them and whatever else, get them what they wanted, right? Different things, whether it's for the office or whatever. And so the guy showed up one day to chit chat with them, and our like so our setup in Kandahar was we were in the container yard. So container yard is like at the back of the base, right? Where like you got this container yard, and then you got like the pits where they burn shit, and then you
Hmm.
got the outsides. So we're back there, and our army folks had the container underneath of us, and we had the container on top like this. And so the guy would come up and like chit chat, and he's like, "Hey, who is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, hey, I'm so and so, whatever." And so the guy took a liking to me. No, I mean, I can't blame him. Like,
Yeah, who wouldn't?
I'm
Have
a
such a
good-looking girl, right?
magnetic personality.
Yeah. Probably not the personality I want to attract, but he would come in and like tell me about his wives and like you know, I had a good body for bearing children. And I'm like, pretty sure you're wrong there, but okay. So it started like relatively benign, and I joked off and laughed it off, whatever. And then, over time, like there became this animosity between me and my E6, um, for like not being part of like that whatever little seedy group that was
Yeah.
going on, and I was much more of a rule follower and we were there to do a job and I want to do this do this job and blah 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 blah. So so the guy like after the first couple times was like, like saying to my E6 like, hey, hey, I like her, whatever. And he's like, oh, he's hot for you, whatever, just take one for the team. And I'm like, no. Hello, man, love Thursday. Why don't you take one for the team?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, no, this guy's like into you or whatever. Like, we haven't been able to go back in there and have dinner. Like, if you do this, like maybe we could get these perks and stuff. And I'm like,
I
dude,
believe
like,
all that's
are you
called
trying
quid
to,
pro quo.
yeah, I'm like, I'm pretty sure it feels like you're trying to pimp me out for like dinner. I'm like, I'm not really down with this. And I laugh about it now, but it had much deeper impacts, then and, and now at times. But it became rather persistent, and
Mhm.
then, there would be at times where my E6 wouldn't be there at all. And this guy would come up and, lock the container behind him, and it would be me and him in there. And, he would, get right up over on top of me and tell me the things that he would like to do. And I would sit there visibly with my gun on my lap and my finger on the trigger, and like he would leave and I'd be like, all right, I guess today's not the day that this is going to happen. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
relieved, but like, holy shit, what am I going to do? Like, is this going to be an international incident if, I got to shoot this guy you know,
Was this
or
person of some importance over there?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, from another country of some importance. Yeah. So, or like, am I going to disappear into the night?
Yeah.
Kind of deal. So there was lots of like offshoots from that story while we were there that we could get into it another time if you wanted to.
That's totally up
But
to you.
but yeah, it definitely, got to the point of like this isn't a good position to be in. And the person that was putting me in that position thought it was funny. Like, hey, it's funny if she's gonna get raped. Like,
Yeah.
no, not so much. I don't think so. So
Not really a joking matter. Yeah.
no, no. And I remember like I wasn't like too close with our E7s. There were two of them on the team. One of them was up in Bagram, and I remember like reaching out to try and get him to call me because like I wanted to talk about this.
Mhm.
And I had gone to the chaplain and talked to the chaplain and stuff. And he's like the next reasonable person to talk to because he's E7, this guy's an E6, right? And so he called and talked to that guy. And the guy's like, oh no, everything's fine, blah, 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 blah. So then I'm like, I finally get to talk to the chief, and he's like, oh no, he already told me everything's fine. It's no big deal. And I'm like, pretty sure that's a different story than what's actually going on, but cool. Okay. Guess you are not going to be the person that I talk to either. So, I kind of just owned that one, and I ended up telling a couple of other people along the way, and they're just like, wow, that really sucks, but like, can't help you.
Yeah.
Which was a little disappointing, especially now looking back on it. But so going back to the award, so like, I'm holding this in, and the whole time I got going on in the back of my head, like, don't be that girl that causes any problems, like, don't get in any don't have any issues, otherwise there's not gonna be any more girls on the team. And I'm like, shit, I gotta pave the way. Like we gotta be able to, keep having females be able to do this. Like, and it's not our fault that somebody else can't keep their shit together, you
Yeah.
know? So I was like, all right, I got it in my head, like I'm gonna be the strong person because of this. But I also like didn't pursue anything that I probably should have pursued because I had that mindset of like I didn't want to cause any problems. So I think when it came down to, getting this award and going to DC and having the Commandant of the Coast Guard make me an E7, which was pretty fucking amazing. But, in the pit of my stomach, I'm like, wow, you know, the self-talk on that was like, man, I feel like I'm getting this award because I didn't say something, right? And I know that's not why I got the award, right? Like I did good things while I was there, regardless of that situation that happened. I can say that now, but at the time, like, you know, if I had spoke up and said something and pushed the issue, like, would this have been the same result? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know that I can say that. Um,
Makes it hard to enjoy what should be a big moment in your life
yeah.
when you have that other stuff internally.
Yeah, and it also didn't help that like the other half, so like the reserve half of our team was like, "Yay, that's awesome. Good job." And then our active side of the team, which was like Thunder side, which is where that E6 was like, "Oh man, like fuck her. She doesn't deserve that. Like that's bullshit, blah 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 blah," right? Just
Yeah.
talking smack. And there's always going to be haters, I know, but
Well, I
like
try to
having the
have some modicum of understanding just because so like I have friends who are rangers and I've known guys in special forces and like we'll get rewards for or I'm sorry, awards for stuff they do every day 10 times a day. So they
yeah,
get that like, well, why do they deserve an award? They do what we do all the time. So not to say that that's right, but I
yeah,
try to at least come see from their perspective of
yeah,
but if they maybe thought about it a little bit more, you would be like you're proving or you're explaining it to yourself. Like we don't do this all the time. It
yeah,
is a big deal when one of us achieves something like this.
yeah.
So like it should be celebrated. Not you should be forgotten,
Yeah,
but people should recognize this stuff.
yeah,
So not to say that those active duties guys are right in if they were dicks about it. I mean, absolutely not. But I mean, it you definitely deserve, I think, the awards because you've done awesome things. And I mean, just
well,
from the small time of learning more about you that I didn't know in the past however long, it's like I mean, you pushed forward before a lot of the big news articles of like girls and the Rangers and stuff like that. Like you were being a part of that kind of idea. So I mean, I definitely think you are deserving of the things you've earned.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that I tried to use that opportunity, throughout the rest of my career to really help take care of other people, and make myself feel more like I earned it, even though at the time I didn't necessarily feel like I did. I mean, I accepted it graciously and it was a huge honor and opportunity. Um, but going back to like that commander talking smack about one of the guys on his team that was put up for a similar award, like just because he, was having a tough time and crying, like, really?
Well,
I cried myself to sleep lots of nights. So,
that
that
just comes
doesn't,
down to bad leadership. I mean, because it's pretty simple. Do you ask the question like, what did he get an award for? Well, he did an excellent job doing this. What did he do an excellent job doing that? Well, yeah, he did. Well, then that's what the award's for. Like the
yeah,
crying part outside of it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
he got the job done. So, like, what's the argument, man?
yeah. I mean, on the flip side, it could be said like, hey, well, you got this award or you got this promotion, but you're a real fucking dick.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people that I know that got promotions that probably didn't deserve it.
Well, I have a theory for some of them, and it's called the hand on the car. So
Yeah.
some people just stick around long enough that they have their hand on the car and they leave it there until everybody else leaves, and then they get the car.
Yeah. Well, for a lot of them, in my experience, it's they get promoted because they make themselves known whether they did anything or not. So
Yeah,
so a lot of times the more humble people who are doing all the work, they don't care about the accolades, so they don't get the promotion because
yeah,
the commander doesn't know they did the work. So someone else goes like, "Oh yeah, I did all this work," and then they get the promotion even though they didn't do any of it. And
yeah.
So there is a certain level of like you should put yourself out there. Like you should probably have your hand on the car too,
Yeah.
but try not to be a useless piece of crap about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that rings true like military and civilian, that's just like life in general and
Yeah,
people.
for sure.
I One of the cool jobs that I had in the Coast Guard was so after I got that award in I'm 87, at the same time I had applied to officer candidate school when I was in Afghanistan.
Hmm.
And I helped said E6 with his application as well. Um,
Because you're
and
a
I
good
got
person.
accepted. So I was supposed to go the summer after I got back. And because of the injury that I had to my hip, I couldn't go that first summer. So I had to go through you know, through some rehab and stuff. And then but they held my spot and I went the following year. And there was all sorts of, questions like, oh, are you gonna stay and be a chief? Or are you gonna, be a master chief? Or are you gonna, go to the dark side? And I was like, oh, well, I want to go to the dark side. Not for like, at the time it wasn't for like the money or the status or anything like that, but it was really because I had I had this officer that I worked with in New York, and most of the people that know me will know what I'm talking about. And she was just awesome. She was part of the Reserve Force Readiness staff.
Hmm.
So, like, she was active duty, but took care of all of us reservists. And she really worked with me, like, before I went to Deepwater Horizon, so that way I could do some training. And, like, she was just the type of person, like, you'd sit down with her and she'd be like, how you doing? And it wasn't like the common like, oh hey, how you doing? And you expect like the, oh fine, great, how are you? It was like, no, I mean like, how are you doing? And she would sit down and she would take the time, whatever it was out of her day, to like listen to positives, negatives, let you cry, like whatever it was, like just sort of that caring person. And I saw how she made a difference in the lives of the people that I was with, because the reserves tend to be like, the redheaded stepchild of the service, and I'm sure that rings true across services.
For
Um,
sure.
so having somebody that can be the voice for the underdog was great, and she was a huge advocate. So I was like, man, if I ever get the opportunity, like I want to be her. Like I want to have the opportunity to be that person who gets to advocate and help the underdog and do all these things because like that's what I have enjoyed doing ever since I was a kid, probably. And so I did. So I became an officer for that reason. And one of the jobs that I had a couple after I went through OCS was I went to our headquarters unit and I had gotten into the same program that she was in, so I became a reserve program administrator and I was an assignment officer. So I don't know how assignments work in the Army, like where you go from job to job.
Hmm.
But on the Coast Guard side, we had centralized assignments. So like a bunch of us weenies all sat in an office in DC, and we had it for us, it was separated by like districts, so different regions, right? And then I'd have all of the reservists in that region, and I would um move them from place to place. I would do career counseling with them, I would do mentoring with them. And it was probably like one of the best jobs that I had in the Coast Guard, like as far as having a positive effect on people's lives, without like, changing all these policies or revamping things, like just being able to like have those conversations day to day, like, well, what do you need? Like, what do you want out of the service? Like, let's figure out a way to get to your end game kind of a thing. And I loved it. Like, I love that job. I didn't always like all of the, like the bureaucracy of being in headquarters. Um, but I found a way to get things done and to network and to make friends with people that knew how to get things done.
Hmm.
Um, and I learned the policy really well, going back to, the very beginning, right? Um, So I learned what I could and what I couldn't do, and how I could, best advocate and find the happy medium for the service and the member at the same time. So I really liked that job. And I think, in the course of the 3 years that I was there, I probably mentored over 3,000 people,
Wow.
which was pretty awesome. Maybe not all of them liked where they went, but they knew that I would at least hear them out, and I would listen and see what I could do. Because that's just like the type of person that I was. Um, so it was pretty neat to be able to do that moving forward, and kind of learning those things early on about um, you know, telling people that they're wrong sometimes, of people that are uh, you know, senior to me in the most
the
respectful way
I say
as
the way,
possible.
what most effective way to do it or not do it.
Yeah.
And
I remember so back when I was in college, I interned at one of the county courthouses, and I interned for a criminal court judge. And I spent a whole semester with him. And I remember he asked me one question. He was like, you know, first couple of days, right? Like, hey, Miss Snyder, what makes a good attorney? And I'm like, knowing all the rules, right? And he's like, partly, but knowing all the rules so that way you can find a way around them. The best attorneys can find the loopholes in the law and make it work in their favor. And I'm like, oh, that's genius. Okay. Um, and I think I've applied that sort of logic throughout my civilian and military careers.
yeah.
Like, all right, I need to research this. I need to understand every bit of it so that way I can know, you know, when somebody else is wrong, when my advice needs to be, spot on, and when we need to do something different.
Mhm.
So kind of like fast forwarding from then till now, like right now I'm going through that with the Social Security Administration.
Yeah. We
And
spoke a little bit about that offline.
yeah, yeah. So and I think I'm probably gonna have to go, or like hit pause on this in a few minutes, and take this little guy out and feed him. But
Okay.
um so yeah, so a quick snippet. And this will be something that, like, if you want to talk to be more on camera in detail, we definitely can, because I think it's something that needs to get out there
Well,
for
if
people.
it's something that you want, I definitely do. So I was going to ask, would it be better if we like took a break and continued in a few minutes? How much more time do you have? It's whatever your schedule depended on.
Um yeah, let's hit pause right now.
Okay.
I have to let me try and feed him,
Hmm.
and see if I can maybe get like another half an hour or so,
Okay.
before he like is absolutely antsy and wants to, be outside running
Okay.
around.
Yeah, if I pause the video, it's going to take 10, 15 minutes or so to render. So it's like you'll have a little bit of time anyway before I'm able to restart a recording.
Okay.
So, so like if you needed a few minutes or whatever, I mean, however long you think it might take, and then just message me and we'll get back.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
If we could do that.
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
All right.